Introduction. A journey into the shadows of sweetness. Good evening, and welcome back to Echoes Through Time. You're here now, safe and warm, perhaps with your head resting gently on a pillow. And as the outside world quiets, we invite your thoughts to drift back in time gently, slowly into the folds of history. Not the kind sung about in triumph, but the kind that whispers from the shadows, from the margins. Tonight we'll journey through the Caribbean of the 17th and 18th centuries, a place of intense tropical beauty, bright sun, rustling cane, turquoise waters, but also a place of brutal contrast, of resistance, ritual, and rhythms of daily survival. You don't need to hold on to all the details. Just let the cadence of history carry you. It was here in the plantation colonies of Suriname and Jamaica that the sweet taste of sugar in European parlors was made possible by unimaginable human suffering. But as always, we will walk softly. This isn't a tale of horror, but of quiet endurance, of lives lived beneath the heel of empire. It is the smell of crushed cane, fermenting sap and sweat, hundreds of bodies moving in unison, the scent rising like steam. A rhythmic chant, quiet and old, carried from far away. The midday meal is a mash of cassava and whatever scraps remain. Protein, when it comes, is rare. Sleep comes on wooden boards or packed earth, and never long enough. Disease moves quickly. The doctor, if there is one, treats you last, or not at all. But mostly, there is only the swish of blades, the creak of carts, the bark of an overseer. Around you are others, men, women, sometimes children, each caught in the slow march of labor. Our journey will begin in the sweltering fields of a Dutch sugar plantation in Suriname. If your hand slips, you bleed. If you slow down, you are punished. The whip is not often shouted about, but its presence is constant, a silent authority. One does not need to feel it to know it waits. Where the sugarcane was tall, the air thick with heat, and the labor endless. You carry no clock, yet your life is divided into two great stretches. The cane season, if anyone far away knows what it costs, for sweetness, and the time between. From dawn until dusk, under the sharp glare of the sun, you work with a curved blade in hand. Boiling kettles hiss and spit, and the grinding machinery wooden cogs. Heavy rollers devours everything that gets too close. The mill does not care what it takes. It does not stop. The cane is taller than you, dense and rustling. You hum, you remember, you whisper your ancestors' names. You dream of rain, you dream of home, though you were taken too young to remember where that was, some by sickness, some by choice. You hear words in languages that mingle: Akan, Kikongo, Dutch, Schranen. A new tongue grows in the cracks. Elders tell stories. Some still know the old gods. Some still dare to dance. Each stalk must be sliced cleanly, bundled, and dragged to the carts. The leaves are sharp razor-thin edges that cut the skin with every brush. You grow used to the sting. You grow used too much. The ground beneath your bare feet is damp and uneven. Your back is sore from yesterday, and the day before that, and the many before. You are awake before the overseer's bell, because your body has long since learned the rhythm of this place. Oh, take a breath. Allow your muscles to release, and let's step back in time. In Suriname. Imagine yourself in Suriname. It is early morning, but the sky is already beginning to burn with the heavy warmth of the equatorial sun. You are enslaved. Your job is to harvest sugarcane. The air is heavy with sweetness and rot. There is little speech in the fields, a muttered prayer perhaps. You drink tepid water carried in a gourd when allowed. If the blade dulls, you sharpen it. The sugar mill is worse than the field. You hope not to be assigned there. It is hot beyond reason. Some die in accidents. But you are still here. And so, you find rhythms where you can. The rhythm of cutting, of stepping, of waking, of surviving. And maybe at night, you join the others, sitting close in the quarters, where the drums are soft, the voices low. You live, not because the world is kind, but because you refuse to vanish. And as you lie down, the sugar still on your skin, the moon a pale sliver above the jungle, you wonder. As the fields of Suriname slept beneath the stars, and the sugar mills cooled, across the Caribbean Sea, in the rugged hills of Jamaica, another rhythm pulsed through the night, one not of submission, but of resistance. In the blue mountains, thick with mist and secrets, A woman named Nanny became a symbol of defiance, of memory, and of spiritual strength. This is the story of Queen Nanny of the Maroons. It came from something quieter, older, passed through generations, from the ashes of war and the grip of exile. Nanny may have been born in Ghana, possibly of the Akan or Ashanti people. Or she may have been born in Jamaica to enslaved parents who had carried the old ways across the Atlantic. What matters is that she remembered. She was never a queen in the European sense. No crown, no throne. Her power did not come from gold or decree. Imagine her walking barefoot along a narrow trail in the forest, eyes sharp, steps silent. Her clothing is simple, practical linen or homespun cotton. Traps were laid in narrow passes. Horns carved from cow bones signaled movements across ridges. They listened to the jungle, and the jungle listened back. Her grave is unknown, but in Jamaica, her name still holds weight. She is a national hero. Her face appears on the $500 note. And in the oral histories passed down, she is not only remembered, she is alive. Around her neck, perhaps a pendant holding ash or herbs. For decades, they withstood every campaign sent to crush them. Eventually, in 1739, the British were forced to sign a peace treaty, granting the Maroons land and relative autonomy. It was a compromise, but one hard one. She carries no musket, but others do. They follow her, trusting not only her wisdom, but something else. Something like spirit. The Maroons were escaped slaves, runaways who carved out their own free villages deep in Jamaica's mountainous terrain. Is one not built in palaces, but grown in the soil, in songs whispered by firesides, in the rustling of leaves. She led not for glory, but for survival. Her story is not loud, but it endures. They lived off the land, farmed what they could, and waited. Let her name drift with you, Nanny, a name carried not by empire, but by resistance. A sea that once shimmered with trade, but also with sorrow. Under her leadership, the Maroons built a settlement called Nannytown. It was more than a hiding place. It was a rebuke. Reports from the time describe her with both fear and awe. She was said to catch bullets, to become invisible, to call upon ancestral spirits. These were not mere legends. They were reflections of her command over herself, her people, and the terrain. When British soldiers came to hunt them, they did not run. They fought. With knowledge of every stream and stone, they struck from the shadows, then vanished. Nanny was more than a leader. She was a tactician, a spiritual guide, and a memory keeper. The British, well-armed and numerous, considered her a threat. In truth, her strategies were clever, grounded in guerrilla warfare. The Maroons used lookouts stationed high in trees. Under Nanny, the Maroons became a force the British could not silence, and Nanny faded into the mists. Some say she died in battle, others that she lived to see peace and passed quietly among her people. To imagine her is to imagine a different kind of power. So now, as we gently leave the forests of Jamaica behind, let the sound of distant drums echo for just a moment longer. And now we turn to the sea. Now, let your mind drift. Over the warm Caribbean waters, out beyond the horizon, the wind is steady, the waves gentle beneath a pale moon, but beneath the calm surface lies a silence that hums with memory of vessels lost to time and the lives they carried. These are the ghost ships of the Atlantic slave trade. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, over 12 million people were forcibly taken from Africa, crammed into ships bound for the Americas. The transatlantic journey known as the Middle Passage was a corridor of unimaginable suffering. Not all those ships arrived at their destinations. Some vanished at sea. Its voyage was interrupted by a pirate named Blackbeard, who captured the vessel and rechristened it the Queen Anne's Revenge. But before piracy rewrote its fate, La Concorde's purpose was grim. When it ran aground off the coast of North Carolina just a year later, it carried with it not only cannons and plunder, but the quiet echoes of those earlier human cargo voyages. The site is now a collaboration between South African researchers, Mozambique's government, and the Smithsonian's Slave Wrecks Project. The goal is not recovery, but remembrance. It's preserved not in display cases or textbooks, but in currents, in coral, in memory. But the search continues. Not just with sonar and divers, but with ceremony. Libations poured on the beach. Names spoken aloud. Silence held with purpose. It arrived in Alabama in 1860, decades after the transatlantic trade had been officially outlawed. Its owners burned and sank it to hide the crime. For over 150 years, it was a rumor until 2019, when remnants were identified in the Mobile River. Only darkness and the occasional flicker of bioluminescent life. The ships are there, suspended in quiet. They do not demand attention. They simply exist, waiting to be remembered. Storms, disease, rebellion, and neglect led to hundreds of wrecks, scattered like bones along the ocean floor. But the ghost ships remind us that history is made not in tallies, but in texture. In planks and nails, in waterlogged beads, in the rusted manacles of a drowned past. Even today, descendants of those last captives live there. The ship's rediscovery has sparked renewed efforts to tell their story, not through suffering, but through survival. Today, the ocean still holds them. Let us begin with one such ship, La Concorde, but not to the fields, not to the forests, to a different world entirely. Behind closed doors, beyond plantation walls, into the carved wood, porcelain, and polished silence of colonial luxury, underwater archaeologists, historians, and descendants of the enslaved have begun to trace these ghost ships, not to glorify, but to honor. Each wreck is a submerged archive, a fragmented memorial. Originally a French slave ship, La Concorde set sail from West Africa in 1717 with over 500 captives aboard. For centuries, few looked for slave shipwrecks. They were seen as unremarkable. But that began to change. One of the most significant discoveries was the Snow Paquette Africa. In 1794, the Portuguese slave ship departed Mozambique, carrying more than 400 enslaved people. It never made it far. Just off the coast of South Africa, it hit a reef. The ship broke apart. Over 200 people, chained below decks, drowned. The rest were sold once rescued. The incident was noted in shipping records, then largely forgotten. Over 2 centuries later, divers located the wreck. Rusted shackles, iron ballast, wooden planks, warped by salt and time. Another ghost ship is the Clotilda, the last known slave ship to bring captives to the United States. The survivors of the Clotilda founded a community called Africa Town, preserving African traditions and language for generations. The ocean does not easily give up its secrets. These wrecks are difficult to locate, scattered across vast distances, broken by time, sometimes buried under sediment. The slave trade is often remembered in numbers. Millions taken, thousands perished. Now, imagine the stillness below. No waves, no wind. As we rise gently from the depths, we return now to land. The air is still warm, but it's filtered muffled by thick stone walls and tall shuttered windows. The sunlight that once beat down upon the sugar fields now dances across polished mahogany floors. We are inside a Dutch governor's mansion, somewhere in the Caribbean, perhaps Paramaribo in Suriname, or Willemstad in Curaçao, is the early 18th century. The scent of cloves, old paper, and beeswax lingers. The mansion is quiet, but not empty. Dutch officials in powdered wigs and dark coats. A woman in a lace collar and silk gown, her expression unreadable. The artist is unknown. The subjects are forgotten by most. But here, in this cool and silent room, their presence remains. She does not speak unless spoken to. Her hands are steady. She has been trained or punished into stillness. A visiting official sips wine cooled with ice harvested from European mountains and shipped across oceans. The sugar in his tea was produced just a mile away by hands now blistered, now resting briefly. Imagine entering through a high arched doorway. The ceiling above you soars wooden beams imported from Europe, painted with soft creams and faded sea greens. He believes in the future. He believes in stability. He believes the world he has built will endure. And in a way it has. The floors gleam, waxed weekly by enslaved workers whose names you will not read in the account books. Tour guides whisper dates and names, and visitors walk slowly, reverently. Few speak of what happened outside the walls. Fewer still mention the staircases that led down into kitchens, into holding rooms, into silence. The tropics do not call for warmth. Instead, it is a little echo of Holland, in a place where palm trees grow wild. The facade and what lies behind it. A world of comfort, paid for with suffering. You are far from the cane fields, far from the salt air. You are safe. Sometimes it whispers through the worn floorboards of a mansion or in the rusted iron of a sunken hull, not to haunt, but to remind. That even in the quietest places, there are echoes worth hearing. And sometimes it is carried in the songs passed down quietly among those who survived. A life of order, built upon the backs of those whose lives had none. But outside, the fields whispered, the forests remembered, and the sea, just beyond the garden wall, held the memory of ships. The furniture is heavy, ornate rosewood and walnut, carved with shells and vines. Ledgers list quantities of sugar, shipments of rum, and the costs of replacing a laborer who died in the fields. We've felt the weight of the sun on our backs in the fields. We've followed the quiet strength of Queen Nanny into the hills. We floated beneath the waves among ghost ships in memory. And we've stood in the quiet luxury of a mansion built on denial. The language is cold, precise. The ink flows without pause. Chairs are arranged just so, not for comfort but for display. There is a sitting room with Delft tiles around the fireplace. Though it is never lit, along the walls, portraits stare outward. In the study, the governor pores over correspondence, letters from Amsterdam, reports from estate managers, requests for cannon repairs. A servant enters quietly, perhaps a young girl, barefoot, balancing a silver tray with sweet black coffee.
Upstairs.
Behind shuttered doors, the governor's wife tends to domestic matters. She writes letters home. She embroiders. She supervises the cook, the laundress, the wet nurse. Her world is narrower than her husband's, but gilded all the same. Her dresses are stiff with starch, her gloves perfumed. Her world may seem quiet, but it is built atop noise-scrubbing, chopping, weeping, laboring. In the afternoon, there is music. Harpsichord plays softly in the drawing room. The governor speaks of commerce, of civil order, of progress. Because you can still walk through these houses today, some are museums now, the floors still creak, furniture still gleams. To imagine this mansion fully is to see both surfaces and shadows. Here, even stillness has weight. And as we take one last look at the high ceilings, the heavy drapes, the elegant porcelain from Delft, remember this: the governor slept well, surrounded by wealth and security. Conclusion: the sweetness and the silence history does not always raise its voice. Sometimes it hums in the background. Tonight, we've wandered through 4 facets of one painful truth: that the sweetness of sugar came at a human cost, too heavy to measure. Now, let your mind settle. Let the rhythm of history slow to a gentle pulse. As you drift toward sleep, may the stories linger softly. Good night.